Welcome to the September 1st meeting of the Historic Environmental Quality Control Board. I'll call the meeting to order and ask everyone to say the Pledge of Allegiance to the imaginary flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America,
to the which it stands,
one
United States of America,
indivisible,
stands
liberty,
one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And are there any requests for absence?
No, I didn't receive any.
Okay. Can we start with a roll call, please?
Mr. Andrade? Mr. Campbell?
Here.
Mr. Colley?
Here,
Ms. Galvez Duros? Ms. Odell?
Here.
News?
Here.
Mr. Ryan? Mr. Trachtenberg?
Here.
Mr. Tragash?
here,
Dr. Hopper?
Here.
And we have quorum.
Thank you. I will start by reading a statement of the chair. Pursuant to Executive Order number 20-150 issued by the Office of Governor Ron DeSantis on June 23rd, 2020, which extended Executive Order number 20-69, municipalities may conduct meetings of their governing boards without having a quorum of its members physically present or at any specific location, and by utilizing communications media technology, such as telephonic or video conferencing as provided by Section 120.54(5) Florida statutes. Members of the Historic and Environmental Preservation Board are appearing remotely for this meeting. Procedures for the public comment will be explained by the city attorney shortly. Are we ready to swear? Do we have anyone to swear in? No one at City Hall?
Yes, we have somebody in City Hall.
Well, we're
1 second, I'll go swear them in.
waving, but they're still muted.
I should have known you were back there. I just came in, so I didn't see you.
All right.
I do.
That's called.
Do you want my name?
Not yet. Okay, I think that's everybody sworn in. We have two sets of minutes to approve. We have the minutes of March 3rd and July 7th. We'll start with March. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes of March 3rd, 2020? Or is there a motion to approve as submitted?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Mr. Tragash and Mr. Trachtenberg. All in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
All opposed? Any additions or corrections to the minutes of July 7th, 2020?
No.
Is there a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as presented for July 7th.
Yeah, I was gonna get second.
And I will second that.
I think I got several seconds. Any discussion on that motion? No. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. And we'll move on to, is there anything the Assistant City Attorney wants to say?
Yes, I do have my statement.
Okay, go ahead.
First, I wanted to note for the record that the last executive order issued by the governor was 20-193, issued on August 7th, 2020, which extended Executive Order 20-69 that allows for virtual quorum and use of technology to conduct these meetings. Any person who is a lobbyist pursuant to Chapter 2, Article 6 of the City Code must register with the city clerk and comply with related city requirements for lobbyists before appearing before the Historic and Environmental Preservation Board. A person may not lobby a city official, board member, or staff member until registering. A copy of the applicable code section is available in the city clerk's office or online on municode.com. Any person making a presentation, formal request, or petition to the board concerning real property must make disclosures required by the city code in writing. A copy of this city code section is available at the office of the city clerk or online at municode.com. The agenda and the materials for each item on the agenda for this virtual meeting was published and made available to the board in advance of the meeting. Materials for each item on the agenda are available during business hours at the city clerk's office and online 24 hours a day at miamigov.com. Any person may be heard by the board through the chair and pursuant to the published notice for not more than 2 minutes on any proposition before the board unless modified by the chair. Since this is a virtual meeting as authorized by the governor of the state of Florida, members of the public wishing to provide public comment can do so by uploading a pre-recorded video or voice message, pre-register for a callback to provide live public comment, submit public comment via the city's public comment form, or provide live public comment at City Hall. I will provide more details in a moment, and more details can be found at miamigov.com/virtualboards. All comments submitted will be included as part of the public record for the virtual meeting and will be considered by the board prior to taking action. The city will accommodate speakers in person at City Hall, subject to all emergency measures in place to prevent the spread of COVID-19, subject to screening for COVID-19 symptoms. Any persons exhibiting any symptoms will not be permitted to enter City Hall. All interested parties are required to abide by all state, county, and local emergency orders and are urged to remain at home and practice social distancing. If a proposition is rescheduled, the opportunity to be heard may be at such later date before the board acts on the proposition. When addressing the board, the member of the public must first state his or her name, address, and what item will be spoken on. When the board takes action or votes on any proposition before it, it shall do so by roll call vote to be recorded and included in the record. Anyone wishing to appeal a decision by the board for any matter considered at this meeting may need a verbatim record of the item. A video of this meeting may be requested at the Office of Communications or viewed online at miamigov.com. Please silence all cell phones and other noise-making devices. Any person with a disability requiring assistance, auxiliary aids, or services for this meeting may notify the hearing board's liaison. Please note that board members may have generally been briefed by city staff on items on today's agenda. Items shall proceed in accordance with emergency ordinances 13902, 13903, and 13914. Pursuant to emergency ordinance number 13903, parties, including any applicant, appellant, appellee, and any person recognized by the decision-making body as a qualified intervener, as well as the applicant's representatives and any experts testifying. They either can make arrangements with hearing boards to be physically present at City Hall to be sworn in, or may appear virtually and make their own arrangements to be sworn in person at their location by an individual qualified to perform such duty. Also pursuant to that ordinance, members of the general public are not required to be sworn in. Pursuant to ordinance number 13914, city staff may be sworn in by city hearing board staff or the city clerk's office remotely by audio video communication technology from a location within the state of Florida, provided that the city staff can be positively identified. Members of the board shall disclose any ex parte communications to remove the presumption of prejudice pursuant to Florida statute section 286.0115. Regarding access and public comment accommodations. Access to the meeting. The City of Miami is using Zoom to hold its September 1st, 2020 Historic and Environmental Preservation Board meeting. Zoom is a cloud platform for video and audio conferencing, collaboration, chat, and webinars across mobile devices, desktops, telephones, and room systems. In order to ensure that the public has the ability to view the meeting, the city's communications department will broadcast the meeting through all the usual channels and avenues that are provided when a Historic and Environmental Preservation Board is held fully at City Hall. The meeting can be viewed live on Miami TV at miamigov.com/TV and on Comcast Channel 77 within the city. The broadcast will have closed captioning. The meeting will also be on YouTube. Additionally, the city selected a virtual platform that does not require the public to purchase or download any additional software or equipment to watch the meeting. Aside from the Zoom platform and that the participants will be appearing remotely, the public will have no discernible difference in their ability to watch the meeting. Regarding public comment, the city has developed several new methods of ensuring public comment for a virtual meeting. It has established 4 new options. The first new option allows the public to provide public comments via the city's dedicated public comment voicemail by calling 305-250-5343, where individuals leave a 2-minute voice message that will be played during the virtual meeting. The second new option allows for the public to submit a 2-minute video to be played during the virtual meeting. The third new option allows the public to submit comments via an online comment form. Comments submitted through the comment form have been distributed to the board members and the city administration throughout the day so that the board can consider them prior to taking any action. Additionally, the online comment form will remain open during the meeting to accept comments and distribute to the board members until the chair closes public comment. The fourth new option allows the public to pre-register online or by calling 305-250-5344 to provide live public comment by phone during the virtual meeting. For all of these 4 new options, all comments received will be included in the public record of the meeting. The city created a simple set of instructions explaining how the public may submit their comments. Those instructions were provided in the notice and published online at miamigov.com/virtualboards. Additionally, like any other Historic and Environmental Preservation Board meeting, the public may provide public comment at City Hall. As previously mentioned, all speakers desiring to appear in person will be subject to all applicable emergency measures in place to prevent the further spread of COVID-19 and subject to screening for symptoms of COVID-19. Any persons exhibiting symptoms will not be permitted to enter City Hall, but can participate through the remote options described above. These 5 public comment options established and provided for the Historic and Environmental Preservation Board comply with Section 286.0114 and Section 120.54 of the Florida statutes. The city published an agenda as well as included in the notice to the public the items and topics that will be discussed at this virtual meeting. Additionally, the public has been given the opportunity to provide public comment during the meeting at City Hall and via the online public comment form, and within reasonable proximity and time before the meeting via the public comment voicemail, video upload, online public comment form, and live callback options. Moreover, Section 286.0114, subsection 4C of the Florida statute specifically authorizes the city to prescribe procedures or forms for an individual to use in order to inform the board or commission of a desire to be heard, to indicate his or her support, opposition, or neutrality on a proposition. The city, through its 5 public comment options, has provided 5 different procedures and forms to indicate such support, opposition, or neutrality on the items and topics to be discussed. The city provided information on how to submit comments in the notice to the public and on a dedicated webpage. Board members, are you comfortable with the notice provisions and uniform rules of procedure we've established for this virtual meeting?
Yes.
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 Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Yes.
Why isn't the lighting working here, Luna?
Chair, before we move forward, should city staff members be sworn in now?
Open this back. You
Um,
have to close that. You have to close
Can we
the
please
back.
make,
Because the lighting is coming from the back and creating a shadow on your face.
It's fine.
And if you're not speaking, please mute your microphone.
Beatrice, can you swear Wendy, Isabel, and I in, please? Wendy, Isabel, can you put your video on, please?
Yes, and Quatisha also.
Sorry.
Raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
I do.
Thank you.
My next point is I've received some text messages and emails from applicants. We can see you there as attendees, and I believe you will be able to speak when your item comes up. So I wouldn't get worried about it just now. You will be promoted to a panelist once your item comes up. Some of the people, or all of the people speaking, have notaries. Will they be sworn in when their individual items come up by their notaries at their location? Amber, should we make them wait, or can they be sworn in now to save them?
From a legal standpoint, they can absolutely be sworn in now. From a logistics standpoint, I think we would have to promote them to, I guess, a panelist, and they would have to come on video and then be sworn in. So I am not sure if that's feasible, if we know who needs to be sworn in right now, and if they can be promoted to panelists.
Chair, is that something you would want to do, or wait till each individual item? What would the board prefer? Would you prefer the applicants to be sworn in when their item comes up?
It'd probably be, if it's possible, it'd be probably better to do it now all at once.
Yeah, and that means that some people will not have notaries waiting there for potentially quite some time. If you're in as an attendee, can you raise your hand if you have a notary there and you're required to be sworn in?
We have another city staff to be sworn in here on camera.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead.
Raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, so the best way to do this is, I suppose, Cassandra, can you take yourself off mute and have your notary present, please? Is your notary present, Mr. St.
Yes.
Please go ahead and be sworn in. Okay, Mr. Conklin, can you unmute and please be sworn in?
I'm unmuted and I have my notary present, but we're not exactly sure how. Oh, do I swear?
Yes.
Do I swear to tell? Yes.
Raise your hand. Raise your right hand.
Right hand.
Okay.
Okay.
Do you swear to tell the truth and nothing but the truth?
I do. I swear.
Thank you. Can you remove Mr. Conklin back to an attendee, please? Mr. Salim, do you have your notary there?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, hello.
Okay, go ahead.
One second. You swear that the testimony you're about to give in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Is that sufficient, Amber?
Yes, that should be fine.
Okay, can you move Salim back to an attendee, please? Can we go to Francisco Perez Azua? If you unmute, you can be sworn in.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Nicola Lendl. My commission number is 33204. Go ahead and raise your right hands, please. Do you solemnly swear that your statement in this matter are true to the best of your knowledge and belief, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
Thanks. If we move Mr. Perez Azua back to an attendee, can we have Mr. St. Louis back as a panelist, please, to be sworn in?
Mr. Who, I'm sorry?
Cassandra St. Louis. I think he's in as an attendee. Are you ready to be sworn in? Yes.
Yes.
Okay, go ahead, please. Do you have a notary there with you?
I do not.
I'm sorry, is this a Creole interpreter?
Yes.
Oh. So he does not need sworn in?
Right. If he's just the interpreter, he doesn't need to be sworn in.
Okay. Christine Rupp, do you have your notary public with you?
She was sworn in.
She was sworn in.
Oh.
Okay, I think we're good.
Okay, well, while you're on, do we have any discussion items? Or,
No discussion items. I can give you some updates if you would like.
okay,
The Chapter 23 amendments are now in place. As you remember, the main changes were there is now a greater notification requirement in terms of time, and there's a 500-foot radius for special certificates of appropriateness, and there is also a greater appeal time for applications, and any nominations for historic designation must now be moved forward with a supermajority of members. So these are now in full effect, and these were discussed in the past. So any applications that we now have are now subject to these new requirements in Chapter 23. The Olympia Theatre, I had a discussion with Terrell Fritz recently, and we had a meeting online about the potential funding sources for the Olympia Theatre and ways in which we can move this forward. So there were discussions about TDRs, TDDs, the tax incentives, the federal tax credits, if it's going to be eligible, and various other methods of funding, the current grant that they have. So hopefully we'll see that moving forward. And I believe that at the past couple of meetings, some board members have raised questions about the large metal structure in Loomis Park. If Isabel is here. Isabel, can you give the board an update on what's happening with the metal structure at Loomis Park?
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. Just an update from Loomis Park that they requested a COA and it was issued about 2 weeks ago for their perforated aluminum panels. And this was in following their conditions from the HEP board resolutions of 14015. And they're expected to continue applying the panels and move it forward and complete it by end of year. Thank you, Warren.
And I believe that's all the updates I have at the moment, unless there are any questions on any items.
I have a question, Warren, if that's okay, Chair Hopper. I was in the area the other day of 3701 Park Ave, and I realized that that's a historic resource. It was recently designated, and I see there's quite a bit of construction going on, including the colonnades that I think were from the Royal Palm Hotel, and that whole structure is being kind of altered. So I was curious just if you knew what was going on there, if they had been in liaise with your office, and just to generally make sure that things were being observed.
This application was actually approved, I believe it was back in maybe 2015, 2014. It took a long while to get started. From everything I can see and everything that's been run past me recently, they are meeting the conditions set by the board at that time. There were actually 3 applications. One was a certificate of appropriateness, one was a certificate of approval, and one was for waivers. And I believe the accessory structure had been torn down and they're building a new home adjacent to the historic home. That's effectively 2 lots there. There is a slight issue with the neighbour to the north of them, who is also in a historic property. I have spoken with him and his attorney. The issue is over a boundary wall between the 2 properties. I know that both the owners of 3701 and the property to the north both have attorneys now. What I was told was that there was an agreement set in place at some point about what was going to happen with the wall between the properties. That agreement was never presented to the board, so that is where I've left it. When I receive any of the documentation that is supposedly out there, I will obviously run it past the city attorney's office. But from what I can tell, they're following the board's conditions. But there is this issue that just recently cropped up about the wall between the 2 properties.
Thanks, Warren. Appreciate the update.
Anything else? If not, we'll move into the agenda, beginning with HEP item number 1.
We're reading the title into the record.
Oh, I forget. Am I doing this again? HEP item number 1 is a resolution of the Miami Historic and Environmental Preservation Board pursuant to Section 23-4 of the City Code of Ordinances, approving or denying the preliminary evaluation of local designation as a historic resource for the property located at approximately 1401 Southwest 5th Street, Miami, Florida 33135, with folio number 014102006460, further incorporating the analysis in the attached staff finding report entitled Exhibit A with the following findings. Is the applicant present? So unmute yourself and give your name and address for the record.
Hi, it's Christine Rupp. I'm out here in the lobby, so I'm coming up under Oscar Torresela, but I'm not Oscar.
Okay. And we'll start with the staff report.
Okay, pursuant to Section 23-4A of the City Code of Ordinances as amended, the applicant is requesting a preliminary evaluation for the designation of an existing multi-family residential structure located in the parcel zone P4L. The subject property is within the Lawrence Estate Land Coast subdivision and the Little Havana net area. The subject property is a two-storey structure in the streamlined modern style. The architect has not been identified. Construction is of concrete block and stucco with a flat roof, and the structure contains 4 apartments with 2 on the first floor and 2 on the second. Architectural features include a symmetrical front facade with 2 central cylindrical staircases leading to the second floor, concrete eyebrows, corner windows, narrow bas-relief plaques with a floral leaf decoration on the parapet and between the first and second story bay windows, recessed horizontal banding and pronounced vertical banding. The subject has a fine example of the streamlined modern architectural style situated in an area which has very few, if any, other similar examples of this style. It's associated with the housing needs of the middle class urban workforce in a dynamic but also convulsive period in the world, only 1 year away from the start of World War II. The structure appears to be in good condition and, according to the designation report, retains its integrity of design, setting, materials, workmanship and feeling. Alterations include the replacement of the original metal casement windows with metal awning windows, alterations to window openings, and the addition of metal handrails to the exterior staircases. The designation report states the property may be eligible for designation under the following criteria. 3, it exemplifies the historical, cultural, political, economic, or social trends of the community. The housing apartment building is a transition piece in the way of life of Miami, and the housing units reflect the need of a middle-class urban workforce. The use of a modern aesthetic in such early stages indicates a tuned-in, progressive, international, and avant-garde willingness to break from predecessor styles and represents a new society. While the building nods to its local sunny tropical location with the ample use of fenestration and curves, it also indicates its insertion into current international affairs. This is a dynamic but also convulsive period in the world, 1 year away from World War II. Number 4, it portrays the environment in an era of history characterised by one or more distinctive architectural styles. The building is clearly different to the nearby prevailing styles in its use of a modern architectural design. The surrounding buildings and typologies promoted by the owners of the Lawrence Estates co-subdivision are of the Belvedere bungalow type, usually a single family home, and the mission-related types, either single family or up to 3 stories high apartment types. The design of the subject brings an extroverted, almost exuberant approach to the architecture. The design of the stairs is a central element to the building. They have a centred, visually prominent location. They encourage the visitor to move in and around the open space terrace and offer several points of view from the building towards the street. Number 5, it embodies those distinguishing characteristics. The building embodies the subcategory of modern architecture called streamlined modern. Although the term was non-existent at the time it was built, the term is used to distinguish a narrow transition period between the intensely ornamented Art Deco architecture to the more sober and abstract interpretations of the modern styles later developed. The building is a solid, rational statement of functionality, aesthetics, and structural elements embodied in a single sculptural work. The streamlined aesthetics are shown in the dynamic horizontal thin lines traversing the building, mostly eyebrow canopies around rounded corners. It brings a sense of velocity, movement, technology, and the future in general. Number 7, it contains elements of design, detail, materials, or work of outstanding quality, or which represent a significant innovation or adaptation to the South Florida environment. The modern apartment building offers an ambitious, unapologetic, and avant-garde design for its time. While at times it lacks detail and refinement, this is compensated by the punch it brings in the overall concept of the project. No drawings have been found of this building, so it is not possible to identify the architect. The transition period between Art Deco and full modernity, where this building stands, is today referred to as streamlined modern. There are few residential buildings to compare with this style in Miami and none in the neighbourhood found so far. Conclusion, to be designated as a historic resource, a property must have significance, possess integrity, and meet one or more of 8 criteria. As detailed, the subject is a fine example of the streamlined modern architectural style associated with the housing needs of a middle-class urban workforce in a dynamic but also convulsive period in the world, only 1 year away from the start of World War II. It retains sufficient integrity to convey its significance and meets 4 of the 8 criteria. Pursuant to Section 23-4A of the City of Miami Code as amended, the Planning Department recommends the preliminary evaluation for the designation of the property located at 1401 Southwest 5th Street as a locally designated individual historic resource be approved. This will allow staff the time necessary to conduct the additional research required to finalise the analysis as to the significance of the structure.
Thank you. Do you have anything to add to the staff report? You'll need to unmute yourself first.
Yeah, hold on a second. Let me see if I can get these guys to. I'm sorry, I'm testifying online. Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Hopper, and thank you, Warren, for that great assessment of the preliminary report. So I wanted to give you guys a little background on the importance of this building and this project. Dade Heritage Trust has been working with Miami-Dade County to try to find ways to resolve affordable housing issues. And in this past year's county budget, we were given a grant to purchase a building that could be deemed historic and also restore it and preserve the affordable housing that it offers. And so this building is affordable, but the living conditions are currently substandard. And so what this project is going to allow us to do is to preserve this beautiful Art Deco building and preserve the naturally occurring affordable housing that it offers. So it's a wonderful project and we're so proud of it. We've already made a couple minimal landscaping site improvements, and it looks like post-hurricane season, working with staff, we'll be able to jumpstart this project and move it along and make the building as beautiful as it could be.
Great, thank you very much. Is there anyone from the public who wishes to speak on this item, or do we have any comments? I'll take that as a no. In which case I'll close the public hearing and open it up to the board for questions or comments. Or motion.
I'll make a comment. I want to commend the Dade Heritage Trust on the designation report, the preliminary designation report that they prepared. It's very thorough and very well done. And I think you've selected a very worthy candidate, because this is very representative of the late 30s streamline architecture.
I'd like to make a comment. I've been listening to some real estate professionals about post-lockdown situations in real estate. And they specifically mentioned that low-rise apartment buildings are becoming very popular, since a lot of people are leaving the high-rise buildings that they used to live in, like especially places like New York. So this is a very good move and a very good precedent to set. That's my comment.
Great.
Thank you, guys.
Anybody else? Are we ready for a motion?
All right, I'll make a motion to resolution of the Miami Historic Environmental Preservation Board pursuant to section 23-4 of the city commences 101 Southwest 5th Street. Further incorporating the analysis in the attached staff report entitled Exhibit A.
Thank you. Is there
I
a
will
second?
second that motion.
Okay, Mr. Trachtenberg, thank you. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, can we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Tragash,
Yes.
Mr. Trachtenberg,
Yes.
Mr. Campbell, Mr. Campbell,
Yes. I'm unmuted. Yes, 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 yes.
Mr. Colley,
Yes.
Ms. Galvez Turos,
Yes.
Ms. Odell,
Yes.
Mr. Prieto y Munoz,
Yes.
and Dr. Hopper.
Yes,
Motion passes unanimously.
thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Okay, we'll move on to item number 2.
Item number 2, file ID 7753, a resolution of the Miami Historic and Environmental Preservation Board pursuant to section 23-4 of the City Code of Ordinances, approving or denying the preliminary evaluation of a request to rescind the local designation as an historic resource for the property located at approximately 3603 Charles Avenue, Miami, Florida 33133, with the folio number 01412100761110.
Is the applicant present? Please give your name and address for the record.
My name is Thomas Conklin. My actual home address is 310 Lenox Road, apartment 2V, Brooklyn, New York, 11226. But the property we're talking about is on 3603 Charles Avenue, Miami, Florida, 33133.
Right, thank you. And we'll start with the staff report.
I should mention that Mr. Conklin is representing his mother who owns the property. He has submitted documentation saying that he has full power of attorney to represent her in this matter, and that was submitted to us.
Great.
Pursuant to section 23-4A of the City Code of Ordinances as amended, the applicant is requesting a preliminary evaluation to rescind the local designation of an existing single-family residential structure located on a parcel zone T3R. The subject property is within the Fro Homestead subdivision and the Coconut Grove Met area. On July 16, 2018, the Historic and Environmental Preservation Board of the City of Miami, pursuant to resolution number HEPR 18050, designated the subject property as a locally designated resource as part of the wood frame vernacular residences of Coconut Grove Village West multiple property designation. The applicant is requesting a preliminary evaluation to rescind the local designation. The subject property comprises a one-storey wood frame structure built in 1928 with a two-storey rear addition. The Miami-Dade Property Appraiser website indicates additions were added in 1966 and 1989. In 2018, the property was determined eligible to be designated as a historic site as part of the wood frame vernacular residences of Coconut Grove Village West multiple property designation. To be eligible for the designation as part of the multiple property designation, properties must be located within the West Grove, built within the period of significance of 1911 to 1941, be of the wood frame vernacular style, and be associated with the establishment and continued settlement of the area by Black Bahamians, African Americans from the South, and their descendants. The properties are also required to retain sufficient integrity to convey their significance and meet at least one of the 8 criteria listed in section 23-4A of the City Code. As surveyed for the designation report, the subject property is located in West Grove and was built in 1928, which is within the period of significance. The original structure has many features associated with the wood frame vernacular style, including a wood frame with horizontal wood siding and wood trim, concrete piers, a pitched gable roof with metal shingles, and an open front porch with a shed roof and exposed rafters. Previous inhabitants of the property include, in 1929, James H. and Lizzie Sweeting. James was born in the Bahamas and was a labourer. Lizzie was born in Florida. 1935, Jack Long. Jack was a labourer, and according to the 1930 census, he rented the property and was from Georgia. 1937, John and Louise Long. John was a caretaker. 1937, Jack H. Vaughan. Jack was a yardman at 4197 Douglas Avenue. 1942, David and Bertha O'Brien. and 1944, Randolph and Marie Woods. Randolph was a labourer. With regard to integrity, section 23-4A of the code states properties may be designated as multiple property designations if they possess integrity of design, setting, materials, workmanship, feeling and association. Although altered, the subject property retains sufficient integrity of design, materials and workmanship to convey its architectural significance. The major alterations include the addition of a two-storey addition to the rear and the replacement of the original wood frame windows with metal awning windows. The original house is still identifiable and many of the original features remain. The addition could be removed and replaced with a more appropriate addition, and the windows could be replaced with a more appropriate style. The subject property retains integrity of setting as it remains on its original site within a residential area. Feeling is a property's expression of the historic sense of a particular period of time, resulting from the presence of physical features that taken together convey the property's historic character. As the property retains integrity of setting, design, materials and workmanship, the feeling of early 20th century residential life in the Coconut Grove Village West community is retained. The property also retains integrity of association as it is associated with the establishment and continued settlement and development of Coconut Grove Village West by Bahamians, African Americans from the South and their descendants. As stated in the designation report, the property meets the following criteria. 3, it exemplifies the historical, cultural, political, economic or social trends of the community. The community that these buildings are associated with was established 140 years ago and continues today. The residents contributed to the development of Coconut Grove, Miami and Coral Gables. The community's Bahamian and Southern American roots influenced the style of architecture and construction, and the design of the residences impacted the way they socialized. 4, portray the environment in an era of history characterized by one or more distinctive architectural styles. Coconut Grove Village West contains wood frame vernacular residences that were influenced by the Bahamas and the southern United States. Historically, this style of architecture was found within other Bahamian and southern African American neighborhoods, including Lemon City and Overtown. 5, embody those distinguishing characteristics of an architectural style or period or method of construction. The frame vernacular wood frame structures reflect the architectural trends within Coconut Grove Village West during the period between 1910s and 1940s. They retain sufficient integrity to convey their historic character and construction. On Thursday, March 22nd, 2018, notices were sent via certified mail to the property owners informing them of the April 3rd, 2018 Historic and Environmental Preservation Board meeting, where the proposed multiple property preliminary evaluation was reviewed. On Monday, June 18th, 2018, notices were sent via certified mail to property owners informing them of the July 3rd, 2018 Historic and Environmental Preservation Board meeting, where the proposed multiple property final designation was scheduled to be reviewed. The review was continued to a special meeting of the HEP on July 16th, 2018. Both notices were sent to the property address, which was listed on the Miami-Dade Property Appraiser website. The applicant's representative has confirmed the mailing address was recently changed to show the owner's current New York address. The applicant did not submit an appeal requesting reversal of the HEP decision to designate the property. The applicant is requesting that the historic designation of the subject property be rescinded, as the current owner is elderly, is on a fixed income, and cannot afford the upkeep and costs of the property, which has been vacant for over 2 decades and has fallen into disrepair. The applicant states the cost of repairs is around $300,000, while the property is appraised at an estimate of $150,000. The applicant further states structural issues have caused 2 potential purchasers to walk away from a sale. The applicant has provided a condition report of the structure and a notarized response to financial hardship questions. Section 23-4C8 of the City Code states, the board may amend any designation by following the same procedures as set forth in this section. The board may likewise rescind any designation if the structure or feature of principal historic significance has been demolished or destroyed. The applicant has not submitted any information explaining how the structure or feature of principal historic significance has been demolished or destroyed. Conclusion, for a designation to be rescinded, the structure or feature of principal historic significance must have been demolished or destroyed. The applicant has not provided any information which shows this, therefore the request does not meet the requirements of the City Code. Staff finds the request for preliminary evaluation to rescind the local designation of an existing single-family residential structure does not comply with the applicable criteria. Pursuant to Section 23-4A of the City of Miami Code as amended, the Planning Department recommends that the preliminary evaluation to rescind the local designation of an existing single-family residential structure be continued to allow the applicant the time necessary to provide sufficient information to show the structure or feature of principal historic significance has been demolished or destroyed. I did convey this information to the applicant, and I suggested he may want to bring that information with him to the meeting today, but I'm not sure if he has it or not. Is it my? Can I speak now? I wasn't.
Yes, Mr. Conklin.
Okay.
It's your turn. Is there anything you'd like to add to the staff report?
Yeah. Well, the document that I submitted, the inspection, basically shows the state of the house at this point, which most of the wood on the roof, most of the wood in the front, most of the wood in the floors have significant wood rot. And so at this point, even if I were to figure out how to get enough money to restore or replace all of that, it would, at that point, it wouldn't even maintain the integrity of being a historic property at that point. At that point, it would then be basically a replica. And based on the document that I've submitted, it's very clear that the home, it's not demolished, but at this point, it would need to be just to make it livable or habitable at this point.
Okay, is there anyone, do we have any public comments? Sorry. Mr. Adams, does that satisfy your need for documentation?
This is the preliminary. This has to follow the same process as a designation, so you're only voting on the preliminary at the moment. The applicant does have to come back for the final review. What I would suggest is if there is anything that the board feels the applicant should add to this application or this request, then this is really the time to ask for it, or if there are any questions. The code is quite clear on what is required. And so I would encourage the board to ask any questions now and advise the applicant of anything else that they would like to see that they feel would help make the final determination.
Okay, before I open it up to the board, this delisting would have to follow the same procedures as designation. Does that mean it also requires a supermajority?
This application was submitted prior to the new code coming in, so Amber, is this application subject to that?
If it was submitted prior to the code change, then the general rule is that when the application was filed, whatever provisions were in place at that time would govern that application.
So 5 affirmative votes.
Right.
Okay. Now, any questions or comments or suggestions from the board?
I have a question for the applicant.
Yes, sir.
You mentioned in one of your letters that you had 2 potential purchasers walked away because of the condition of the property.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So, but the problem with them was not the historic designation; it was the condition of the property. What is that correct, or what?
That is correct. The problem with the first purchaser was that they didn't. I can't remember exactly what it was, but you're correct in terms of the second couple. They were intent on maintaining the historical designation, but the downside to that is that in terms of the property is just pretty much been sitting there for a while, and when people even call on to find out about it, as soon as they hear about it being a historical designated property, they kind of walk away. So it's kind of like, whereas if there was no designation on the property, we'd have 20 people interested in it. But because of that, now it's like one for every 2 to 3 months. And then even with that one, it's kind of, will they have financing? Because now it's not about just purchasing the property. It's about also having enough money to restore the property.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions or requests?
Warren. Hi. Question for Mr. Adam. I was looking at the pictures, and the property seems to have been altered significantly. I see an addition back and also the front porch. They added on a room as well to the front. None of that plays into all those alterations into the historical designation?
When we designate something, there are certain things we look at. Number one, was it built within the period of significance? Yes, it was. Number two, is it associated with the history of the Grove? Yes, it was. Number three, does it retain sufficient integrity to convey its original architectural and historical feeling? We accept that historic properties are altered. In fact, that's what the board do on a monthly basis. They review alterations to historic properties. The real question is, has the integrity of that building been affected to such an extent that you can no longer associate it with the history, or you can no longer recognize its architectural style? And in this particular case, yes, we recognize that that is an inappropriate addition on the rear. However, the original building is still identifiable. If someone had come in and removed all of the wood siding and coated the whole building in stucco and completely changed the configuration of the windows, then that is not a building that we would look at. In our opinion, the actual historic structure that was there is still identifiable and retains sufficient elements that you can determine what it was. I think one of the things that the applicant is raising is for this house to be repaired. So much of that would have to be replaced, that how much of the original historic structure do you have left? And this is one of those areas where we're really coming into the preservation philosophy, how it ties in with chapter 23. And there are no doubt going to be many different opinions on whether the integrity of that property has been destroyed to the point that the original significance can no longer be identified. And the other thing, of course, is it would cost money, but theoretically you could remove that addition and build a more appropriate addition. You could reinstate the original single hung or double hung sash windows. But there comes a point where you think, well, how much work is too much work to remove its historic significance? So that's where we are with this one. We felt it retained sufficient integrity to be included.
I'd like to ask Mr. Conklin another question. What's the relationship between the addition and the house? Can you enter from the rear of the cottage into that two-story thing? Is there a doorway, or do you go out? Is it? I know it's attached physically, or do you come out and go in?
So
how does that work?
So there's a lot of wood rot, so you can't open the door, but there is a door in the back that allows you to enter and go upstairs to the second story.
Okay, because in the photographs, I don't see much of the circulatory conditions in there, like how you move from room to room.
So there's a living room, and because when the structure was first created, like my mom grew up there when she was a child, there was only the living room and the secondary room. And then they added a third and a fourth room and a kitchen. And so it's kind of...
Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
The third and fourth room are embodied in that 2-story.
That's all on. Yeah, that's all on the first floor. In the 2-story addition, there are, give me a second, 2 rooms and a bathroom.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So on the when it was just the pure cottage, there was an extension to that cottage before the 2-story addition.
Right. So it first was a cottage, and then they extended the cottage to spread out to give it like a longer back, and then a second story was added on top of that addition.
Okay.
Oh.
Right.
So there was a 1-story stuck on the back, because I was trying to find any additional structural movements on the cottage itself, but the cottage has remained pure.
Right.
So the first, you've built a 1-story stucco building, and then you added another story to the stucco building that was attached to the cottage.
Right. So
that's the development.
Right. So let me see if we're on the same page. So initially it was maybe 3 rooms total of the house. And then throughout the years, they added 2 more rooms to it. And then I guess in '89, the second floor was just added on top of the already, additional 2 rooms.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And currently, you're saying there's a way to get in from the cottage to the 2-story, but it's a rotted doorway, and you actually can't physically do it.
Right. We haven't been able, because my mom and I, my uncle stopped living. He was the only one that really lived in the house, and he stopped living in the home maybe 15, 17 years ago. And so it's always been just in the family, but we haven't been visiting or anything, and haven't been keeping it up. And so
it's been unoccupied for 17 years since your uncle's passing.
Right. So the thing
really, 17 years is just.
Well, empty. No. What it is that my uncle was he lived in another house down the road, and so he would come by every once in a while, but not for maintenance or.
Okay, I just want to know if it was, and has it been lived in by any person?
No.
In the last 17 years, no. Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions?
Well, then it becomes an issue of how was it maintained during those 17 years, and was it allowed to deteriorate to the point of neglect? I guess I have a few issues. It's not an easy thing to digest, to undesignate a property or structure, and especially when it is at the whim of a couple speculative buyers who say it's going to cost too much money. I'm the contractor on the board, and I restore old places, and anything can be fixed and anything can be restored, and rotten wooden floors don't scare me at all.
Okay.
And to hear it said that, oh, it's been rotting. Well, why is it rotting? Because the roof hasn't been kept up for 17 years. And now it's like, well, a couple people want to buy it, but they run away when they see historic designation, and they run away because they think it's going to cost too much to fix. Well, the other end of that is if they knock it down and build something big, it's going to cost a lot more. So it's not really about the amount it's going to cost. So I don't buy that one. Okay. And I showed up late to the introduction, so I'm trying to look as much as I can as far as the analysis goes. But I'm a little leery of for those reasons of undesignating it from what I have read.
Okay. Just remember, this is preliminary. There will be a final. There will be a second hearing on this item.
I have a question for. Sorry, I have a question for Mr. Conklin. Conklin, you had mentioned this has obviously been in your family for some time. Back in 2018, there was a meeting that was had for anybody appealing the designation. Do you recall, or does your family recall, why you were not a part of that conversation?
Well, at the time, my mom was dealing with the death of her husband at the time. And so things were, and I wasn't a part of the administration of the home. And so I'm not sure what was going on, but I believe that like her mental state, she wasn't worried about what was occurring at the time.
I hear you. So if it was under different circumstances, you believe she would have come and appealed before the board at that time?
Oh, definitely. And once again, my mom lives in New York City, so and within the last couple of years, her mobility has greatly decreased. So, but I know for a fact if she was aware and circumstances were different, she would have definitely come down and appealed.
The reason why I'm asking that is because I may be the only one on the board that is taking this position, but at that time I recall it being an extensive conversation about the neighborhood and the historic nature of the wood frame vernacular and the longtime owners of those properties. And I was under the position, or on the position, that I believe the owners should have rights, whether through grants or through changing of property, underlying zone, transect zone to a higher density to allow for the upkeep of these homes. And I actually was on the side that would appeal or support the appeals. So, of course, I'd be under the same circumstances here. So I am forward with the motion to actually do a further investigation.
There's no motion yet.
I would second that motion.
Right. I'm saying the theoretical motion that may occur.
Well, you need someone to make one.
Well, then I would like to make
one question for Mr. Conklin before.
Sure.
Okay.
I would like Mr. Conklin to provide documentation if this goes through for the documentation on the yearly expenses that this property is costing you and your family.
Okay.
The property taxes.
Yeah.
And any other expenses that accrue, so we can get an idea of what it's costing you to maintain this property without it being sold.
Okay.
Okay.
So with that said, I'd like to make a motion, Dr. Hopper.
Go ahead.
That item number 2, property located at 3603 Charles Avenue be approved for a preliminary evaluation.
I second that.
And Mr. Campbell has seconded. Any discussion on the motion?
Can I mention a couple of things, Chair?
Yes, please.
This is the preliminary evaluation. So the next one would be the final determination. This is the preliminary evaluation that you have. And secondly, please bear in mind that the code only allows you to rescind the designation if I will find the wording and I will read it again. The board may likewise rescind any designation if the structure or feature of principal historic significance has been demolished or destroyed. So based on that, if there's anything else that the board feel they will require to show that the structure or the principal feature has been demolished or destroyed, now is the time to ask for that information to be brought forward. It may be that 90% of this property needs to be replaced to make it structurally sound. I don't know. I mean, but now is the time to request this from the applicant.
I have a question. I'm sorry. So, this is Chris. Mr. Adams, so are you saying that the report that was provided for this property right now, I understand, Mr. Conklin, what you mentioned, that it's the majority of the wood needs to be replaced and there's a lot of issues with the existing structure. That report that you're mentioning, what kind of report is it that was provided with this? Because I think what Mr. Adams is going towards is there any kind of documentation from a structural engineer or anything like that that would go to help, describe that the structure may be in a condition that it can't be repaired or saved? Is that, so that's my question. What kind of report did you provide? And then also, Warren, that's what you're getting towards, correct?
We can only, the code ties the board to the circumstances that they can rescind the designation. We need to make sure that we have all the information available to make us determine that. So in other words, has the structure or the feature of principal historic significance been demolished or been destroyed? Now, from my interpretation of that, it's not been demolished. If you were to look into the future and a significant amount of that building had to be replaced, does that constitute the original significance as being gone because there's no longer sufficient historic material left on the building? I would personally think it would be useful if possible. Is there a way to get some more interior photographs of the structure, specifically showing the historic building and the addition and the various levels of the addition, and the areas in the original building actually physically joins to the addition? Is there a way that you can get photographs of that, Mr. Costin?
I can send someone there to take pictures.
Because I think it might help the board if we can actually see, more photos of the interior, where it attaches to the addition.
Okay.
Would the board feel that would be of help?
Yes, definitely. Because I would like to see the relationship, a close-up investigation, the relationship between the cottage and the addition. I think the addition is a Quasimodo-like thing that is quite unattractive to the property. And I would just like to see more information about its relationship, photographs of the interior and the floors, the 2 floors of the
And leading on
the
from
addition.
that, other considerations would be, can you remove that addition and build something more appropriate and keep the historic structure there? Well, yes, you can, but that obviously has a financial consequence. Or the other way to look at it is, does the existing addition have so much of a negative impact on the existing structure that you feel the request to rescind the designation is warranted? Our opinion at the staff level was no, that yes, it is inappropriate, but it could be removed and it could be replaced with something else. At the time of the designation, though, we had no access to the property, obviously, because no one lived there. We had no idea on the condition. So there is quite a bit to take into consideration.
I would argue that this board has approved additions attached to historic structures that have gone through this board. And the argument has been made over and over again that it can't look anything like the original one. It has to be separate. Secretary of the Interior standards and all that. So, I mean, I have personally said some of these look like spaceships next to historic old buildings. So that's just the other argument, that it's meant to look different, right? Even if it's, inappropriate in your eyes.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, that's where we get into the intent of the standards is it should be recognizable as an addition, but it should still work with the existing historic structure. But I do concede that I have seen many different elements where they are very similar and there are only minor differences. And I have seen examples where you would have a historic building with effectively a glass addition added to it, and they've all been approved by a board somewhere. So that really comes down to that there is a certain amount of opinion there based on the guidelines that are available to us.
Mindful of the fact that there's a seconded motion on the floor, I mean, I suppose this constitutes discussion on the motion, but in light of that, staff analysis requested that there was a continuance, essentially requesting additional data to substantiate the request for the de-designation. I would think that, at least from a prudent standpoint, that this board should rely on as much physical evidence and as much data as could be produced for us to consider potentially delisting something. Otherwise, I think we're potentially setting a dangerous precedent with an arbitrary view towards delisting because we've been told that some buyers have walked away and that the property is in poor shape. So I think I would lean much more toward continuing this item until more evidence has been produced and start the process that way rather than just basing it on this precursor situation we just had.
Well, what is the difference? Sorry. I'd just like to
Go
say
ahead, go
something.
ahead.
What is the difference between the motion that was just passed, where we request more information, and then it goes on to whether we actually delist or not? Is that not? I thought that was the continuance.
I understood the motion was to initiate the process to preliminary de-designate. That's how I understood the motion to be.
Okay. So in that, hold on 1 second.
Yep.
In that process to begin the preliminary de-designation, that can also be stopped in the second round, can it not? We could disagree and say no, should not be de-designated, and the investigative materials that we request will be part of the preliminary investigation. So I would like to clarify the motion that has been just passed versus a continuance. What's the difference between the two? Does the motion to delist or to begin the preliminary de-designation, does it move closer to de-designation versus the continuance? Because if, for example, if the continuance is approved and then we will have to now go through 2 stages again. These are my questions.
What you have in front of you at the moment is the preliminary. So this is the preliminary. If this is approved, it moves on to the final review and your final determination. The reason I mentioned continuance of the preliminary was to see if the applicant provided sufficient information that the property or the significant features had been demolished or destroyed. If you feel the applicant has a strong if you feel the applicant has a strong enough case here, you will then move forward to the final review. At that final review, you can approve it, you can deny it, or you can continue it at the final review. If you defer this current or continue this current one, then there would still be another 2 reviews to go. So if you continue this one, we still have to redo the preliminary and the final. If you approve this one, that's the preliminary done. We move ahead to final. But at final, you also have the option of continuing if you.
Understood. Thank you, Warren.
And to follow up with that, I was fully aware when I made the motion, and which is why I prefaced the statement of the 2018 meeting and asked the question if it was possible for one of his family members to have appealed at that time, would he have? Because at that time, I was supporting everybody that was appealing this. I don't think that a lot of these homes should have been designated, so I'm not too worried about setting a precedent. I believe that there should be more care taken to the longtime homeowners of this area, and we should have a higher density allowed for them so that they can actually financially support the designations that may come in the future. So with that said, Warren, has any development on that conversation happened about shifting?
For the next meeting, I will be bringing forward to you the preliminary outline for the applications for the grant program that we have. We have some money there. Obviously, there's a lot to discuss. Should it be a certain percentage? Should it be the full amount? Should it be the difference between installing asphalt shingles and concrete tile? How do you prove that how do you prove financial hardship to claim the grant? So I will be bringing the preliminary outline to you at the next meeting so that we can start finalizing this application process to allow people to start applying for these grants. So we have some money there. We need a process in place. We need to determine exactly what that process is going to be. So maybe before the next meeting, you can have a sort of think about that. The initial plan is to base it on a similar process as the state does their grants. But obviously, the percentage of grant, how much, what does it cover? How often can you apply? When must the money be spent by? When are the application periods? When's the money? All of that has to be determined into a workable program. But I will have a outline for discussion at the next meeting so that we can at least start putting that into place.
And do you think that maybe if we set this up in a schedule, if it's okay with Mr. Conklin, that that would occur, his next step in this process would occur after you had presented those findings?
I think the problem is there are some circumstances where a little money is going to do a lot to help someone. The question is, if you have $300,000 worth of repairs, how much is in the grant fund, so whether there would be a benefit or not, I don't know. It's going to depend on all the individual circumstances.
Right. I mean, obviously, his $300 per square foot assessment of the repairs is probably out of, a little bit out of the context of the real cost. But if it's put in front of him or the family that you can actually get this place repaired without very low cost to them, they may want to keep it historical. So I think that gives, options that aren't on the table at the moment.
And the final would not be scheduled for next month, would it?
That's why I'm asking, yeah. Mr. Adams.
We normally do it 2 months before we schedule the final.
Because Mr. Conklin needs some time to gather those pictures and
get the information in within a certain amount of time, so that it's not rushed on everybody's for everyone. But yes, the intention of the grant scheme is to make money available to these homeowners who are in financial need. The question is, how do we do it fairly, and how do we do it so that the money we give out has some positive impact in the neighbourhood and the properties?
Mr. Conklin, just basically to reiterate what's happening here, a question for you. If it was presented to you that your home could be repaired with a grant structure and it would have minimum cost to you, let's say 10% of what was proposed, maybe $30,000, would you be okay to maintain a historical significant or historical nature of your home if that was the case? We can repair it for that cost.
That would be a discussion I would have with my mom. But
yes. It would open up the conversation.
Yeah, definitely. It would be a discussion because, like, right now we can't do anything with it. With that option, I mean, that gives us possibilities of different things.
And I think Mr. Conklin here is a good example of the support that we could give to people who typically are trying to have family wealth over owning a piece of property for 100 years. That we should keep in mind when we're designating certain structures that are uninsurable or very difficult to repair. So I suggest that we delay the final at least a month after we get the next findings from Mr. Adams that he just described.
Any other discussion on the motion? Motion was to accept this as a preliminary and move to the final undesignation. Okay, can we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Trachtenberg?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
Mr. Trolley?
Yes.
Ms. Galvez Turos?
Yes.
Ms. Odell?
Yes.
Mr. Prieto y Munoz?
Yes.
Mr. Ryan?
Yes.
Mr. Tragash?
Yes.
Dr. Hopper?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously, and the decision is final unless appealed with hearing boards within 15 days.
Thank you, Mr. Conklin. We'll see you in a couple of months.
Thank you.
Okay, we're on to item number 3.
Item number 3, file ID 7752, a resolution of the Miami Historic and Environmental Preservation Board pursuant to section 23-6.24 of the City Code of Ordinances, approving or denying a special certificate of appropriateness to permit new construction and site improvements for a new single-family residence located approximately at 975 Northwest 10th Avenue, Miami, Florida 33136, within the Spring Garden Historic District.
Is the applicant present?
Who's the applicant?
Can Francisco Perez Azua? There he is.
Here he is. Could you unmute yourself and give your name and address for the record?
Yes, Francisco Perez Azua, 3731 North Country Club Drive, apartment 1823, Aventura, Florida.
Okay, thank you. We'll start with the staff report.
Reading the
Who's
staff
got it?
report. Yes, reading the staff report into the record. The following is a review of the request pursuant to Section 23(6)(2)(b)(4) and Section 23-6.2 of the City Code of Ordinances and Preservation Office Historic Design Guidelines, the Secretary of the Interior Standards, and Miami 21 Code. The applicant is requesting a special certificate of appropriateness to permit new construction and site improvements for a new single-family residence over a vacant lot. Since the designation of the Spring Garden Historic District in 1997, the subject plot has been recorded as vacant, allowing the vegetation to densify. The existing and developed tree canopy supports a natural and tropical microenvironment familiar and unique to the district. The proposed new single-family residence is an asymmetrical two-story structure designed in the contemporary architecture style with modern and mid-century qualities, nested within the property's existing trees. The architect's intent is to ensure minimal impact on the existing tree root system, with a raised structure of a concrete pilaster pier foundation system also supports the required flood criteria for the living spaces in the area of special flood hazard. The raised structure consists of contemporary CMU block walls, poured concrete, and aluminum stud construction with typical flat and single pitch roof assembly. The proposed design retains 56% of the 5,000 square foot lot for green space when only 25% of green space is required by the Miami 21 Code. 3 zones are apparent within the elevations and floor plans and can be referred to as the carport, the main living space, and the outdoor deck. 3 rectangular volumes protrude towards the street view while the rear of the structure steps outwards on the south side of the raised deck. The tallest visible volume from the right-of-way is placed above the front door, but the highest elevation has been placed in the rear of the property. There are 2 habitable areas in the structure, which can be understood as a carport on the north side and the main living space on the south side, connected by the transitional interior space, which contains the foyer and the staircase. The transitional interior space and the exterior deck create an open courtyard in the center of the structure for the existing 25-foot oak tree to be retained. The carport has a floor-to-ceiling height of 8 feet with a finished floor of concrete pavers and is hidden from the street view with a black aluminum horizontal screen. A wash basin, bin storage, and suspended mechanical equipment are located at the rear of the carport. The interior space above the carport's exposed ground floor includes 2 bedrooms on either side with a shared bathroom in the middle. The main living space is divided into 2 floors. The first floor provides an open floor plan designed with its living room, kitchen, and dining room accessible to the elevated deck. A powder room is located to the east of the kitchen. The central staircase is directly next to the foyer facing the central courtyard. The living room has 3 continuous walls of glazing as sliding glass doors and fixed windows, offering views into the central courtyard, elevated deck, and rear yard. The second floor provides a laundry room, home office, and a suite, which contains a master bedroom, bathroom, and walk-in closet. Since the carport and main living spaces are at different elevations, a mixture of 2 different roof types are proposed: flat roofs with parapets and pitched roofs with a flat fascia. The pitched roofs are to be of white single-ply PVC roofing material. Within this design, the exterior colors of the finish of the parapet and pitched roof soffits are currently undefined. Roofing detail specification and a manufacturer's brochure are color photograph indicating style, color, and finish shall be submitted to staff for review. The design's prominent exterior surfaces of architectural engineered materials include smooth exposed concrete, echelon CMU masonry in a glazer finish, and faux wood cladding in a Java finish. The main elevation rendering depicting the street visibility illustrates the cladding and masonry surfaces evenly balanced on 5 different surfaces each. The rear elevation depicting rear yard visibility illustrates a cascading roof line from left to right with a predominant use of masonry to cladded surfaces. At ground level, the elevated deck and piers are visible while the similar carport horizontal screen blocks visibility into the carport from the rear yard. Please note the provided renderings are shown as white surfaces, but are to be of CMU glacier masonry and faux wood Java finishes. All windows and exterior doors are to be of impact-resistant aluminum PGT window guard manufactured in bronze finish and high-performance low-E gray glass tint. Window styles are a cohesive mixture of fixed, single-hung, and horizontal rollers. The front door is a custom impact-resistant pivot door with side light and flush solid core. The horizontal roller doors in the rear of the residence are floor to ceiling, providing natural lighting into the dining room. Custom fixed windows in the front yard and courtyard rear of the residence are located to the maximum picture views without compromising privacy. Horizontal aluminum fencing with a sliding car gate is proposed at 4 feet in height at the front of the property, while a horizontal wooden fence at 6 feet in height is proposed at the main fencing for the lot. Exterior ground surfaces include permeable turf stone pavers for the driveway, concrete pavers for the carport, elevated and exposed concrete landings in the front door, and exposed wood deck with 3 descending tiers in the rear of the property. The driveway extends from the availability street access across the front yard into the carport. The Secretary of Interior Standards and Guidelines for Archaeology and Historic Preservation recommends designing new construction in a historic site or in a historic setting that is compatible but differentiated from the historic buildings, and using site features of land formations such as tree or sloping terrain to help minimize the new construction and its impact on the historic building property. Neighboring residence properties located on the north and south sides of vacant property were built in 1941 and in 1969 in the architectural style of bungalow and minimal traditional. The proposed new single-family residence in between these two properties maintains a similar color scheme with a contemporary flair designed to fit the existing landscape. While this is a raised 2-story building, there has been an effort to reduce the massing by leaving the carport sides open, provided a tier front and rear elevation, and retaining the highest point of the building only to the rear of the property. Most of the existing matured and long-standing trees are to be retained by proposing an expensive front yard and spacious courtyard. This design reflects modern design elements similar to Brillhart Architecture's Spring Garden residence, where new construction encourages the use of architectural materials without proposing a false sense of historicism or a modern white box. Contemporary designs that blend into the landscape and associate elements from the neighborhood are to be encouraged for a sustainable and thriving historic district. The proposed new structure is compatible with the Spring Garden Historic District in terms of residential occupancy and suburban landscape development. However, it is not compatible in the following terms. Form. The proposed form of elevated volumes hidden between the existing trees promotes a contemporary construction and assembly for a single-family occupancy and vehicular accessibility without detracting from the historic residence and supports the Spring Garden's unique tropical microenvironment. The floor plan efficiently utilizes the property's footprint to meet the side and rear setbacks of the property's T3R suburban transit requirements and proposes a large front yard, keeping in style with the district's spacious street view character. At 2 stories in height, with a maximum height of 28 feet, 25 feet based on the base flood elevation of 3 feet, the proposed structure appears to be relatively high next to its neighboring 1-story residential properties, but it is consistent with the Spring Gardens residential area and required base flood elevation. The aerial view of Spring Garden supports a developed green area of single-family residences. The proposed design provides a balanced mixture of built, permeable, and natural surfaces. The use of architectural engineered materials, exposed concrete, CMU, masonry, and cladding does not distract from the neighboring historic properties. The proposed colors from the architectural materials and exterior finishes are consistent with the neighboring properties of the district. Rhythm and pattern of the window door openings, fixed and operable windows offer a transparent surface within the exposed exterior materials and provide natural lighting throughout the entire structure, but do not offer a rhythm or pattern. Door openings are placed in logical locations in the proposed point of access areas, front, carport, and rear. The consistent use of bronze finishes for all windows and doors emphasizes the contemporary architectural appeal. The findings are consistent.
So, sorry to interrupt. Just to be clear, what you just read from the form, spacing, height, yards, materials, color, and rhythm, you're saying they're not compatible or they are compatible?
I'm saying that they're not compatible with the district, but are consistent as a modern design.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Shall I read the approval with conditions onto the record?
Yes, please.
Okay. Pursuant to Section 23-6.2 of the City of Miami Code of Ordinances, as amended with the Secretary of Interior Standards, the Preservation Office recommends approval with conditions of the Special Certificate of Appropriateness. 1, the site shall be developed in accordance with the plans provided by Perez Designs, submitted as application PZ 20-7482. The plans are deemed as being incorporated by reference herein. Number 2, the applicant is to define the exterior colors and/or finish of the parapet and pitched roofs. Soffit with roofing details, specifications, and manufacturer brochures shall be submitted to the HEP staff review. Number 3, all glass visible from the right-of-way to be clear and low E. Number 3, horizontal fencing visible from the right-of-way is not allowed in the historic districts. Fencing to be redesigned to follow the historic design guidelines and shall be in keeping with the character of the spring garden. Applicant to propose an appropriate fencing for HEP staff approval and color manufacturer's brochure or color photograph defining the fencing of material, style, and color. Number 5, the resolution shall be included in the master permit. Number 6, the applicant shall comply with preliminary zoning review. Number 7, the applicant shall comply with the requirements of all department agencies as part of the City of Miami building. And we also have received a public comment. Would the board like me to read it into the record?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. The public comment is from Judith Paul, and their comment is the following. My impression of the residential plan for 975 Northwest 10th Avenue in Spring Garden is that it is yet another iteration of oversized stacked cubes found all over Southeast Florida. It adds nothing interesting or appealing to the site. On the contrary, it detracts because it is self-conscious, out of scale, and uncomplimentary to the surrounding housing stock. A single-story cottage, artfully designed, would be much more appealing there. In the architectural description, much is made in the intent to be environmentally sensitive, including preserving the tree canopy and the roots under the house. One wonders how will work with the foundation and the infrastructure such as plumbing. Very difficult to believe that dressing up the exterior and wood look cladding and granite textured cement will camouflage this place, and that 5,000 feet of enclosed living space will just blend into the natural habitat. Close comment.
May I ask who this comment was from? Was it from a resident of Spring Garden or a member of their review of the neighborhood association?
I'm not sure if they're a resident of the association, but their address is listed as 1000 Northwest North River Drive.
And just
is that
sorry,
in Spring? I'm not sure if that's in Spring Garden or not. It's close.
I think
It is.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That'd be 10th Street and North River Drive, right?
Yes.
Or 10th Avenue, sorry.
Okay.
And just for contrast, she mentioned that it was a 5,000 square foot home, but that's incorrect, right?
That is incorrect, yes.
What is the total square footage? Just for contrast here.
Let me double check with the plans. Don't believe it's in the staff report.
I mean, the architect's on it. Maybe he can, as part of his response.
Yes, yes. We'd like to ask the architect.
Well, let's see if Mr. Perez would like to respond to the staff report.
Yes, first of all, thank you for Ms. Castellano for the report. It's very, very comprehensive. The house is 1,950 square feet, so just under 2,000 for the record in answer. I have a few images that I would like to share with the board if the public is present, if that's okay.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen. And let me know if you can see my screen. Now I assume that you are, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this first image just the location of the subject property on Northwest 10th Avenue in the Spring Garden Historic District. Let me figure out how to change this. Hold on. Okay. Oh, there we go. Okay, so this next image, I just wanted to kind of share the vegetation survey of the property. It's a total of 83 trees, of which 9 are oaks. There's 72 palms and 2 acacia. And you know, most of the palms are distributed around the perimeter of the property. So when we designed the house, we kind of the idea was to keep all the trees. Obviously, for practicality, we have to relocate a couple of the palms, like this one, these 2 in the middle, and one over here. But the oaks and the acacias are staying where they are. So the footprint of the house is essentially a result of the location of the trees. There's 4 oak trees in the front here, which are outside the buildable area, which did not present a problem, and a 5th oak back here, which is also outside the buildable area. But there's these 4 oaks in there that you see in here, 2 in the front, 1 in the middle, and 1 in the back, that kind of help us give the shape to the house. So just so you can understand why the house kind of staggers the way it does. Basically the first floor area, this is our lot coverage diagram, where you can see that the ground floor is 917 square feet, which is this area here, and the carport at 418 square feet over here. The driveway is basically the only place where one could drive a vehicle into the property, because obviously over here you saw the 4 oak trees. So this is kind of the one area that we have to bring a vehicle in, and there's 2 oak trees over here, so we couldn't come straight in with the driveway. We had to kind of meander in between the trees. So hence the location of that. This is an image of that first floor area. Again, is about 900 square feet, and it's just basically as the staff report read, just living area, dining, kitchen. And the second floor, this is the lot coverage area calculation for the second floor. Also, we have the 2 bedrooms over the carport over here, and then a suite over the second floor. We made sure that we pushed back a lot of the most of the second floor of the street, so to minimize the impact of the second stories to the neighboring property. And again, that's an image of how the distribution, the floor plan distribution is of the property, of the house. So there's a 400 square foot volume in here, and about a 635 square foot volume on the south side. And the elevations, as you can see here, the maximum building height allowable is 25 feet in the area. We are in that very top volume. The height we're at 23.4 in height. You can see here that where the base flood elevation is, so the house has to be above the floodplain elevation. That's plus 9 NGVD as per the flood criteria in the area. So the house is just above that, and the volume on the north side, the 2-story area on the north side over the carport is lower than the 2-story area over on the south side, right? And that's why this area here we kept as small as possible. This area, the 2-story area over the carport is barely at 18 feet. of height above the ground. I'm sorry. And, this was possible because obviously the carport is on the ground, doesn't need to be above the flood criteria, and it's only 8 foot in height. As of this part of the living area has to be above the flood criteria, and therefore this small area, the second floor over here has to be above that. We presented some. I know that the renderings we sent originally to the staff were not colored, so we've submitted these color renderings that showed. Again, we're dealing with historical materials, right? CMU is a very mid-century. It's been in Florida. It's a very Florida material, the CMU, and what we're proposing is a smooth-faced, colored CMU. And concrete, architectural concrete, and then a wood look that originally was submitted to staff, like a plastic, a wood made of plastic, but we believe maybe a tile would be a better choice for endurance. We're afraid that the plastic-like material will lose the color over time, but let me go back here for a second. You can appreciate here that towards the front is, these lower areas. And then that's the back elevation, where you can see also the materials. There's a lot of glass of the living area into, and this is the deck that the staff report was talking about that basically extends the living area into the outdoors. And you see here where the trees are located. This was made with scanning the property and the existing trees. And that would be the north elevation. So this is that 2-story portion area over the carport. And this is an alternative we've brought in front of the board, and we suggest that instead of the plastic light resistant material, we use this tile. Gabarn is an 8-foot long tile by 12, and that's the color. The windows are bronze anodized, PGT windows, and the proposed standard architectural CMU with this glacier color, and there's a sample of it, and the columns, which would be the architectural concrete. And that's what I have, and really we're just here to have answer any questions that you might have.
Okay, thank you. And I guess that was all of our public comments, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
Okay. In that case, I will close the public hearing and then open up to the board for questions or comments.
Hi, this is Chris. Mr. Perez, I just wanted to say, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. I just want to say thank you very much for the really detailed presentation and the great walkthrough. It seems to me like you guys have done an amazing job designing this new residence in a way which seems to flow really well on the site. And I really like the massing. I think you just did a spectacular job with this personally. So, those are my thoughts at this time. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question. Mr. Adams, was there, I think Isabel touched on it, but were there any comments from either or the rival Spring Garden homeowner associations, whichever one, endorsing or not?
I did not receive anything. I did encourage the applicant to reach out to the neighbourhood associations. I'm not sure if that was done or what their position was. Can you clarify if you reached out to the Residents Association?
Yes. We in fact did a few weeks ago. I sent as Mr. Adams suggested after his encouragement. I reached out, I obtained their email address, and I sent them all the plans, everything basically I submitted to to the city staff. I shared all the plans and all the renderings. I did because because of our home address. We were also. I do know that the association sent an email out to its members. I received it a couple of days ago, I believe, to ask for comments. So I do know that the association, had the knowledge of this being on the agenda, and that they shared to. I didn't see the mailing list, but they shared to the residents, I suppose, that this item was going to be in the agenda, and they invited anybody who wanted to comment.
Okay, the reason why I'm asking is because, in the past, I guess different historic districts, it's a vacant lot, so it's not like you're adding on to or demolishing or proposing demolishing an existing historic structure or even an uncontributing structure, but some have more guidelines to what new construction would look like, and others are more, free to do what you want. All that being said, I'm not a huge fan of modern architecture. Maybe that has to do with me being on this board, right? It's a historic board, but I do acknowledge the things that you have done differently from others that have come in front of us. Respecting the trees, building around the trees. I mean, we've had countless numbers come in and propose to mow it all down, and the fines are part of the cost of doing business, right? But also acknowledging materials that are going to stand the test of time, because so many come in and just whatever, get it done, get it quick, take a picture, sell it, it's gone. But if you're doing something geared to handle the elements, the sun, the rain, the whatever, I mean, just to look like wood. And I've always said that when I see these new buildings with all this Ipe or whatever it is, 30 feet off the ground, I know that's going to not weather well in about 4 summers or less. So acknowledging that just tells me that you care a little bit more. So, I'll probably go along with it.
Thank you, Mr. Ryan.
Yeah. I second Hugh's comments. We've had a particular project come in a few times in Spring Garden we've been wrestling with here at the board, and Mr. Perez, your project definitely gives me some relief over what we felt, what I personally felt dealing with some of the other Spring Garden projects. It is a very modern design, but like Hugh just said, it's very tasteful, and you respect the trees, and you've particularly what I really like is how you've broken up the volumes into different elements and zones, and then raise them and have the piloti and all that. So I like it.
It kind of reminds me of something from the Grove from the 70s or early 80s. I mean, the elevation off the ground is something that should be explored more, to be sensitive to the roots. And that just reminded me, is environmental here? I see Quatisha down at the bottom. Were there any issues with any of the tree coverage, or is everything fine?
You'll need to unmute yourself.
Oh, there you are. You got the same background as all them too.
Yes. Good afternoon, everyone.
Hey.
This design brings a smile to my heart. It's enlightening to see lots of forward thinking, lots of intentional thoughts to preserve our natural resources. So looking at the design and the concept, I don't see any concerns. Looking at the elevations, I see what there was efforts made to minimize or possibly eliminate any damages to the root system. There was great intentional design around them, and I believe we're preserving all of them, right? The preservation of all of them.
Yes.
Fantastic, and it really speaks to the fact that development and sound development can take place, and it can coexist with our natural resources at the same time. So Job well done. I don't see any issues right now.
Thank you.
A question, Mr. Perez, is this going to be your personal residence or are you building it for a client?
No, this is our personal residence. My wife is an architect too, and so we've both been working on it.
Okay, lovely.
Thank you.
I have a question. You said there were 2 acacias. Are those ear leaf acacias?
I'm sorry, there were both, what type of acacias?
Yes, what type of acacia? Are they ear leaf?
I'm not sure. The survey, the vegetation survey, just labeled them acacias. They're towards the back of the property, within the outside of the buildable area. They're yeah. I'm not really sure what type of acacias they are. No, I couldn't really answer that.
Because ear leaf acacias are on the prohibited species list, so you might. Not that that would concern you now, but if you were to take them down, you would have not as much remediation to take place.
Okay, thank you.
If it's ear leaf acacia. Any other questions or comments?
I have a question regarding the tile that you will be using. I know you showed one picture of that tile. It's amazing that it comes in such long lengths, but when it comes to tile, obviously that's a print on that surface of that tile. I would guess that that tile comes in multiple prints. Do you know if that's the case, or if it is all just one pattern?
I don't know.
I think it's worth noting, and while you're planning that facade, at the end of the day, you don't want to have repetitive wood that looks like it's like a tile, right? And the way you lay that out, I think, because this is the front of your design and your facade, you want to come up with an arrangement that looks like it's, a random set of wood planks.
I agree. I appreciate it. Yeah, I appreciate the comment, and I agree with you. And we'll make sure that we'll look hard for the right product. Yes.
Thank you, and I appreciate. And I wanted to highlight earlier the scale of your building is that you could have maximized and you could have built a 5,000 square foot house that you by quote unquote by right, and you chose to build something smaller and applicable to the neighborhood. So I think it's worth noting that you minimized the development, not maximized it.
Yes, thank you for the comment. Yes.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make. Sorry.
Go ahead, Mr. Campbell.
No, I was about to make a motion, but go ahead and ask anybody.
No, go ahead.
Okay, I would like to make a motion for the approval of a certificate of appropriateness to permit new construction and site improvements for a new single-family residence located approximately at 975 Northwest 10th Avenue, Miami, Florida, 33136, within the Spring Garden Historic District, based upon the following conditions. The site shall be developed in accordance with the plans as prepared by Perez Design, submitted as part of the application PZ 207482. The plans are deemed as being incorporated by reference herein. The applicant is to define the exterior color and or finish of the parapet and pitched roofs, soffit, with roofing details, specifications, and a manufacturer's brochure or color photographs, indicating style, color, and finish, and shall be submitted to HEP staff for review and approval. All glass visible from the right-of-way to be clear and or low E. Horizontal fencing visible from the right-of-way is not allowed in the historic districts. Fencing to be redesigned to follow the historic design guidelines and shall be in keeping with the character of Spring Garden Historic District. Applicant to propose an appropriate fencing for HEP staff approval with a color, manufacturer's brochure or color photograph defining the fencing's material by style, color, and finish. The resolution shall be included in the master permit set. The applicant shall comply with the preliminary zoning review, HEP review, quote unquote, and all applicable requirements of the Miami 21 Code and Chapter 17, Chapter 23 of the City of Miami Code of Ordinances. The applicant shall comply with the requirements of all departments/agencies as part of the City of Miami building permit submittal process.
Second.
That was 8 conditions.
8. I see 7 on my paper. Let me look.
I may have broken one of them up.
Sorry.
And I'm sorry. Who seconded?
I don't see a number 8, Mr. Chair. So if someone sees it, could you?
No, I was just counting along with you. I think maybe you just hesitated.
Okay. So are we good?
So there's a motion with 7 conditions. Who was going to second that?
Second.
Mr. Ryan.
I'd like to add,
On the
yeah, I'd
motion.
like to add an 8th condition that the architect will make sure to not create a repetitive tile pattern on the facade.
Yes.
Sure.
That's acceptable. Okay. So there are 8 after all.
Oh, you're right.
I was working for that, Dr. Hopper.
Thank you, Mr. Dreckenberg. Any other discussion on the motion? If not, can we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Campbell,
Yes.
Mr. Ryan,
Yes.
Mr. Colley,
Yeah.
I think that was a yes.
Alves Duros,
Yes.
Ms. Odell,
Yes.
Mr. Prieto y Munoz,
Yes.
Mr. Trachtenberg,
Yes.
Mr. Tragash,
Yes.
and Dr. Hopper.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously, and this decision is final unless appealed to the hearing board section within 15 days.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, and good luck.
Thank you.
And we're on to number 4.
Up item number 4, file ID 7755, a resolution of the Miami Historic and Environmental Preservation Board pursuant to section 23-6.24 of the City Code of Ordinances, approving or denying a special certificate of appropriateness for an addition and alterations to a contributing property located approximately at 888 Northeast 71st Street, Miami, Florida 33138, within the Bayside Historic District.
Is the applicant present?
Yes, I am. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, please give your name and address for the record.
Hi, my name is Sergio Rodriguez. The mailing address is 10830 Southwest 95th Street, and the property address is 888 Northeast 71st Street.
Thank you, and we'll start with the staff report.
Analysis. The existing structure is a ranch-style house built in 1952 and located at Northeast 71st Street in the Bayside Historic District. Plans propose renovations and 2 one-story additions to the residential structure. The applicant is applying to add a one-story addition to the southwest of the current structure, an addition extending from the east side of the residence. In addition, the applicant proposes to convert the west side of the current structure into a garage and the construction of a driveway and walkway. North elevation. The proposed front north elevation depicts an addition to the east of the current structure, which extends the current structure by 8 feet 2 inches. This addition maintains the same roof line and faux brick detailing that currently runs the length of the property. Staff's only comment to this is that addition should be set back from the front facade to highlight the historic structure over any new additions. Staff recommends that this addition be set back 1 foot from the front facade. The plans also depict a new garage to the west of the current structure with access from the street. Currently, the property does not have a garage. However, historically, this part of the structure was a porte-cochere and was enclosed prior to the designation of the historic district. Staff finds the request to place a garage in the location of where the porte-cochere was located as a good homage to the original porte-cochere. Furthermore, the applicant proposes the construction of a new driveway leading from the street to the proposed garage. The property does not currently have a driveway to allow for parking. The roof of the larger addition to the southwest of the structure is visible in the front facade over where the old porte-cochere was located. The west side of the structure currently has a flat roof that is lower than the gable roof of the rest of the building. Plans for the southwest addition show the deck of the parapet roof will be the same height as the gable roof, although the parapet is higher than the gable roof. The window schedule for the project shows that the proposed windows for the front are horizontal rollers. Historically, the property had jalousie windows for which the appropriate replacements are fixed or casement windows with no muttons. Staff recommends that all windows visible from the right-of-way are casement or fixed windows with no muttons. West elevation. Plans for the west elevation show the addition to the southwest extending from the rear of the proposed garage. The proposed west elevation shows the enclosure of a window on the west side of the structure. The addition continues south from the current structure. This addition shows 7 windows staggered the length of the addition. South elevation. The proposed south elevation depicts a glass French door opening onto steps to the backyard flanked by large fixed windows. The applicant proposes to alter the rear of the existing structure by removing 2 solid aluminum doors and 2 awning windows and replacing them with large French glass doors and windows opening onto steps to the backyard. East elevation. The east elevation depicts both additions. The east elevation recreates the 2 windows of the current structure. The southwest addition has a series of glass French doors that open onto steps into the backyard. Further to the south along the addition are a series of fixed glass windows with the same dimensions as the glass French doors. Findings consistent. Recommendation. Pursuant to Section 23-6.2B4 of the City of Miami Code of Ordinances as amended and the Secretary of Interior Standards, the Preservation Office recommends approval with conditions of the Special Certificate of Appropriateness. 1. The site shall be developed in accordance with the plans consisting of 19 sheets submitted under PZ-19-5201. 2. All windows shall be clear with the option of a low E coating. 3. The windows on the front elevation shall be casements or fixed bifurcated in the same dimensions as the current mullions provide. 4. The faux brick detailing on the front of the property is to remain. 5. The east addition shall be set back 1 foot from the current front facade. 6. The applicant shall comply with all applicable requirements of Chapter 17 and Chapter 23 of the City of Miami Code of Ordinances. 7. The applicant shall comply with the requirements of all applicable departments, agencies as part of the City of Miami building permit submittal process.
Thank you. Is there anything you would like to add to the staff presentation, Mr. Rodriguez?
Yes. To start off, I always like to start with the story of why, we purchased a property. This is actually a property that my father has always dreamed of. Very close to the water. I'm not sure if you guys can see more or less where the location is. It's actually very close to the water. We came to this property as a owner that was desperate and they couldn't fix up the property. They ended up selling it to us, and we loved the property from the day we stepped in. The property itself has been abandoned for a while, almost a whole decade if I'm not incorrect. Now the main issue for us to be able to live in the property is that it's only a 2-bedroom property in a 12,500 square foot lot. It is probably the smallest house in the entire neighborhood, yet it has the biggest lot in the entire neighborhood. We're proposing to do these additions to the property so it could accommodate our family there. We like to preserve everything that it originally had. Looking back at the tax card and the pictures, we love the way that the house looked, and we want to bring that to today. Keeping the look of it, maybe not in the same exact dimensions, but definitely keeping what it's there. Adding to the property its original look with the garage there. I know that it didn't have a driveway, but today it'd be a necessity, especially when it starts raining in the property and you couldn't, the cars got all messy. So we really appreciate going out and doing this to the property. I think would add on to the neighborhood perfectly. We want to add on what some neighbors have done to the property. We also want to, match what it's in the neighborhood. We don't want to go out, and I was listening to the previous presentation, make the 5,000 square foot house in the area. We're not building that much. We're not building that 5,000 square feet. But we want to be a part of the neighbors. We've gotten to meet them. They've been asking us, when are you going to start? When are you going to start? We really want to see this property changed. It's been here for so long, it hasn't been taken care of. So, we really do want to go out and put this property back to how it used to be not too long ago. So I would be ready to listen to anything that's you guys want to add on or anything recommendations. I would really appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any public comments on this item? Wendy?
I have received none.
Thank you. Then I will close the public hearing and open up to the board for questions or comments. I have one question. Is the roof on the addition going to be pitched or is it flat like it shows in the...
On the addition, there's 2 additions. The one that's on on the, well, looking at the property at the left side, that addition will match perfectly what's there right now. To the one on the rear end side of the property, it will be pitched a little bit. It'll be a flat roof, but it'll be pitched. So the water, there's no issues with the water staying up there. We don't want to have an issue with the roof further on.
There's
Anybody else?
Sorry,
Mr. Ryan.
I know. I was just going to say the addition, which creates an L, right? You're basically taking the right side and going back with it.
Yes.
That is not very visible at all from the street, unless you're.
Oh, if you're looking at from the street, you'd only see like a little tiny little rectangle up top. You really wouldn't see anything in the back.
The new roof, but you're not. I mean, you're not tying into the new roof. This is a separate roof.
Yeah, that would be a separate roof. Yes, that would be a separate.
And what is the existing square footage of the house, and what is the proposed?
The current square foot of the property is 1,200, if I'm not incorrect, and the proposed is 3,100 or 300. I'm not.
And you're turning it into a 3-2 or whatever.
It'd be right now it's a 2-2. We would be turning it into a 4-4, if I'm not incorrect.
4-4. The lot's 12,000 square feet.
Yes.
The footprint of this building is about 3,000 square feet.
Yes.
Similar to the last one, I wish we saw more of these because small little 2-2s more often than not are proposed for demolition. So adding on to it, I think is a good thing. And when it's not even visible from the street, I think it's a good thing too.
We definitely took that into consideration. We really didn't want to touch anything that didn't belong there, especially in that beautiful neighborhood. I mean, I don't know if you guys been down 71st. 71st is a beautiful street. The middle center aisle is perfect with those very nice palm trees. It really ties in to what we want to do more or less.
Great. Any other questions? Mr. Campbell.
Chris, do you have any? Are you okay with the landscaping situation, Mr. Cawley?
I think we lost him.
Lost him? Well, Mr. Rodriguez.
Go ahead.
I hope I have the right drawings because these were added after. The landscape seems to be quite bare. Do you submit a landscape plan, or do you have any landscape plans you can tell us about?
There should be in one of the site plans, if I'm not incorrect. It does contain where the current trees are, and no trees will be cut. They will be kept. I think there needs to be one tree that needs to be trimmed a little bit, just because of the height of the roof. But other than that, everything will be staying as is. Of course, we'll be adding on some, basic little trees to make it look nicer. But, essentially everything will be staying the way that it is there.
Yeah, I think it's labeled as a green space diagram. It's not specific to what type of tree.
Okay.
In the survey, if I'm not incorrect.
Not moving anything, correct?
Yeah, it's what's there. In the survey, if I'm not incorrect, they should be labeled to what they are. I don't want to get off camera, but I do have a copy.
Oh, I see. They're on the it's to the table, the tree table to the right of them.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
None of them are endangered species.
No, they're not. They're not.
But you're not removing any of even.
I'm not going to be even touching them. I think one needs to be trimmed just because I think if to the addition, it might touch the roof. And I mean, we wouldn't mind it being on the roof. It's just for the installation purposes of the roof, it might need to be trimmed a little bit. The tree itself will stay there. Specifically that one and anyone around it. We don't want to touch anything.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Oh, Chris is back. Okay. Chris, I was just asking about your opinions on the landscape of the property, but I think we're okay.
Are we ready for a motion?
I would make one right away, but I'm looking on my phone. I make a motion to grant a special certificate of appropriateness to allow alterations in addition to an existing single-family structure located at 888 Northeast 71st Street. Go down.
You could say subject to the seven
Yeah,
conditions.
subject to these following conditions. 1, the site shall be developed in accordance with the plans of 19.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. I got kicked off for a few minutes. Thanks.
Okay.
Keep going.
Can I start one again? With condition number 1, the site shall be developed in accordance with the plans consisting of 19 sheets submitted under PZ 19-5201. 2, all windows shall be clear with the option of low E coating. 3, the windows on the front elevation shall be casements or fixed bifurcated in the same dimensions as the current mullions provide. 4, the faux brick detailing on the front of the property is to remain. Number 5, that was 4. Number 5, the east addition shall be set back 1 foot from the current front facade. Number 6, the applicant shall comply with all applicable requirements of Chapter 17 and Chapter 23 of the City of Miami Code of Ordinances. And number 7, the applicant shall comply with the requirements of all applicable departments, agencies, as part of the City of Miami building permit submittal process.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
I think Mr. Campbell seconded that first. Is there any discussion on the motion? Okay, can we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Ryan,
Yes?
Mr. Campbell,
Yes.
Mr. Colley,
Yes.
Ms. Galvez Turos,
Yes.
Ms. Odell,
Yes.
Mr. Prieto y Munoz,
Yes.
Mr. Trachtenberg,
Yes.
Mr. Tragash,
Yes.
and Dr. Hopper.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously, and this decision is final unless appealed within the hearing board section within 15 days.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Rodriguez, and good luck. And I believe we're on to item number 6.
Number 5.
5, sorry.
File ID 7514, a resolution of the Miami Historic and Environmental Preservation Board granting or denying the appeal filed by First Home Development LLC of intended decision BD 18-015142-001 for the property located approximately at 1370 Northwest 58th Terrace.
Is the appellant present?
Yes, I am here.
Please give your name and address for the record.
Karim Shaibi, my address is 900 Boulevard, Miami, Florida 331.
Okay, you might have to speak up a little more.
Can you hear me better?
Yes.
My address is 900 Biscayne Boulevard, Miami, Florida 33132.
Thank you, and we'll start with the staff report.
Okay, this is the analysis for 1370 Northwest 58th Terrace. It's Quarticia Oguntoyinbo Rashad, City of Miami Environmental Resources Division, Chief of Environmental Resources. The subject property is located in a T3L transect zone with a lot size of 5,000 square feet. The Environmental Resources Division is in receipt of an after-the-fact tree permit application for the removal of one native strangler fig, Ficus aurea, at 78 inches in DBH in good condition, and one banyan tree, Ficus bengalensis, at 16-inch DBH in poor condition, and both are located in the frontage of property 1370 Northwest 58th Terrace. The property was issued a building permit, BD 18-015142-001, B001, on December 27, 2019 for the development of a single-family residence. As part of said permit, there were a total of 5 trees on the lot, which were all to remain with adequate tree protection. During construction, the above-mentioned trees totaling 94 inches in DBH were removed, and as a result, the property is subject to the requirements of Chapter 17 for trees removed without a permit. In accordance with Section 17.10.2.1 of the Environmental Preservation Ordinance, the required tree replacement is 32 4-inch DBH by 16-foot height trees on-site and/or off-site, and a tree trust fund contribution for excess replacement trees that cannot be reasonably planted on or off-site. Based on the provisions of Chapter 17, the property or trees removed do not meet the criteria for tree replacement alternatives. Staff recommendation: the Preservation Office recommends that the appeal of the after-the-fact tree removal permit be denied in accordance with the requirements set forth in Chapter 17 of the City Code.
Okay, sir. And you're appealing this because what?
Correct. I'm appealing it. So first of all, we built a single family infill workforce housing. Build only single families and duplexes in the northwest city of Miami and Miami-Dade areas. This is not a high-end, spec home. This is basically a first home type buyer property. The 2 trees we removed, it was a big mistake for me to remove them. I was really confident I would be able to obtain an after-the-fact permit. Why? Because one of the trees was growing in the sidewalk and into the power lines at the same time. This happened right when coronavirus started. So I went ahead, we removed them, and I went same day or the day after to apply for an after-the-fact tree permit removed. I spoke with my arborist, Jeff Szymanski, right after doing that, because I've spoken to him before. He was really upset, saying that I would have been granted that he thinks I would have been granted that permit anyways, because the tree was growing into the power lines and was causing an imminent danger to the neighbors. The main reason why I removed it is because we needed to connect to our sewer lines, and a lateral was right underneath the tree. So, it's something that I regret doing. I shouldn't have done that. I should have first applied for a permit. Planting 64 trees in a 5,000 square foot lot, or 32 trees, as a matter of, is not doable. And I'm asking for a reduction of the either of the fine or the amount of trees that I could plant on the property. And we build these homes often, and I can swear to you that I would never do this ever again. So that's about it. This is entirely my fault. I take the blame for it, but I'm really asking you for help in this. It's been 7 months that the property is sitting there, and we have a 12% construction loan on it, and we just want to move ahead and plant as many trees as we can on the property, but 32 is just not doable, and physically not doable. So.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any public comment on this item? I don't think so. Okay, then I'll close the public hearing and open up to the board for questions or comments.
Hi, this is Chris. Hi, Mr. Schott. How are you?
I'm well. How are you, Chris?
Doing well, thank you. A couple quick questions on the report. On the report just provided, the last sentence, based on the provisions of Chapter 17, the property or trees removed do not meet the criteria for tree replacement alternatives. Do you mind, what exactly does that mean? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Thank you.
Yes, allow me to clarify. In Chapter 17, our tree protection ordinance, there are instances where properties can meet criteria in order to be or avail themselves of tree placement reduction. For example, homestead properties, if there are certain trees that are removed, there can be a replacement of a one. If the property is an affordable housing development that is either procured and or funded by the city, the replacement requirements can be considered for reduction or some adjustments to that requirement, to those requirements. The property here does not meet any of those criteria in order for us to, at an administrative level, to consider any placement alternatives or reduction in replacement.
I see. So, thank you, Mr. Shad. So then, because obviously there'd be no way to fit that many trees on a property so small. So the only option for is a payment into the tree trust fund, correct? Or to go by the book, the only option at this point for the developer would be that option.
Right, so the options that would be available is to plant on the site as much as reasonably possible.
Okay.
And then the second option would be to plant off-site. If there are some locations right on, within that close proximity of the location, if there are right-of-way locations that can accommodate some trees, we will explore that in addition to on-site. And then there are options of exploring if there are parks nearby that can accept some trees. And then also there's the tree trust fund contribution as an option.
Okay, so Mr. Is it Kryby? Sir, did you look at how many trees you would be able to fit in your property to see how you can go about trying to resolve this?
Correct. So we can fit about 7-8 trees, which would leave us with a $65,000 contribution to the street trust fund, and that is more than we're making on projects of this type. I mean, also through the infill program for the county, through the workforce program. This was not given by the city, part of the city program, but it's also homes. We try to keep the cost pretty low, and we're not making that on the property. Numbers and the lumber prices paying interest at 12%. It would kill the process. And, in a year like this one, it would really get in poor shape.
No, I understand.
And we're just trying to get by with it. So.
I understand 100%. I think the issue here is that Mrs. Rashad's hands are tied to a certain degree. That there's nothing in the code that is allowing any kind of flexibility here with regards to this, just because of all these factors. So I'm trying to think if there's anything that we could do to help alleviate the situation. So. Mr. Shah, there's 94 inches of trees removed, and the calculations are a little bit complex working out the calculations and the mitigation replacement requirements. So if it's 32 4-inch DBH trees to offset that, then wouldn't that be like 134 inches or something like that of replacement, which is even more than was removed? Does that make sense? My question?
Right. So the reason why the number significantly exceeds what's being removed is because this is after the fact. So if it was before the fact, then the mitigation actually will be lower. Because we have an after the fact situation, it's double what it would have been. I would note that when the applicant was in for permitting, we did notice, you know, that the tree, one of the trees are in poor condition. One of the ficus trees, it is in poor condition. But they decided they wanted to work around it and to keep those trees. They wanted to keep all trees on site. Had they requested for it to be removed, there would not have been any issues, no concerns. It would have been authorized for removal. So that thought process, our position does not change in the sense where we do feel the tree in poor condition should have been removed, warrants removal. It just wasn't done at the appropriate time. So to know that it wasn't.
Okay.
The only reason, I mean, it costs us more to remove trees, right? We have to hire.
Okay.
The only reason why we removed it is because when we're building this. Hello.
Mr. Colley, could you mute yourself for a moment and see if that helps our connection?
Hello.
Go ahead.
The only reason why we removed the tree is because we had to connect to the sewer and we had to rebuild the sidewalk. We would have never, I mean, it cost us more money to remove the tree. And that's why we avoid removing trees on all our properties. We try to build them within a budget, and whenever possible, is where they are. It was growing in the power line, so we couldn't connect our over. And on top of that, we had to connect our sewer, and we had to rebuild the sidewalk. Mind you, we build in areas where like we experience, you know, a lot of vandalism and things like that, and we try to go as quickly as possible, and that was definitely the wrong move to do in this particular case. I should have gone to the city hall and applied for my permit and waited for it, and trust me, I've been regretting this every day for the last 8 months. And that's something that I would never do again, and you know, we're building more affordable housing in the city, and if you can just help me out on this one, I would be forever grateful.
Any other questions?
I have a question. Has there been any documentation, whether photographic or written, regarding the trees that were over the sewage lines or the power lines, or any sort of proof of that?
I have a report from. I have an arborist report from Mr. Szymanski, and I can submit it to you. And he's saying that the tree, the bigger tree, the 78-inch DBH tree, was uplifting the sidewalk and was growing into the power line, and that the other one was an invasive species. So I could resubmit this for review. I have a more updated one from him, and you know, but yes, the answer is yes.
Mr.
Is that the banyan tree?
Excuse me,
Yes.
I couldn't hear you.
No, was the banyan tree the one that was over the sewage lines and growing into the power lines as well?
Ficus aurea, yes. It was
Ficus, okay.
Right, so from the report that I've read, I hear Mr. Sharabi say you have an updated report. I don't think I've seen that one, but the one that we have reviewed, the ficus, there are two ficuses. One is the native and one is non-native. The non-native ficus tree, I believe they're both in the front yard. The one in poor condition is further away from the sidewalk. Am I correct?
Correct.
This one is further away from the sidewalk. I'm unable to see if there were any conflicts with any underground utilities or any proposed underground utilities, but I will confirm that it was in poor condition. The native ficus tree was near the sidewalk. I don't know if there was a proposal to improve that sidewalk. I don't know. I can't say yes or no, but I don't know if there's any proposals to improve the sidewalk. It was adjacent to and probably underneath overhead utilities. There was some utility pruning, but it was in good condition. It was in good condition. And so that was the condition of those particular trees, those two trees. If that answers your question.
Yes, thank you.
Chris, you had another question?
Well, it was only just that if there was any
Yeah, maybe for the moment you can turn off your camera and turn on your mic.
that would have been helpful to Mr. Shah.
Could you say all that again, please? We didn't get it.
I'm having a bad connection. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, that's much better.
Okay. Sorry about that, everyone. I guess I'm just looking for a solution. I understand that what happened here, this has been a terrible thing with, you know, the health emergency that's occurring. I understand for the beginning of a project. I understand that a lot of times ficus trees, you know, they seek out water below, and that this tree could have been growing over a water main connection area. But I also understand Mrs. Rashad's point of view here that, look, based on the information that's been provided, what's supposed to happen, which is why obviously this is here before us today. And I'm just wondering, you know, I see both sides of the coin, and I'm looking for some sort of common ground to see if there's anything that we could do in this situation if the board was amenable to it to help mitigate this. And the one thing is obviously if we could get as many trees as possible on the property, then that would certainly be helpful. The other thing was I didn't know if there was anything in a revised report which may help if, for instance, we continued this project and a revised report was provided to Ms. Rashad, if there could be anything in there that would help us. Then the other thing would be, I guess, a question to Ms. Rashad that, I mean, I understand that your hands are tied, but if the board was amenable to trying to find some sort of a middle ground in this situation, based on the fact of type of project that it is, and that it's a workforce housing type project, and that the intent in the code in certain scenarios is to offer situations that could be better for certain people in this situation. Ms. Rashad, would you be amenable to that if we can find some sort of middle ground here?
Absolutely. Absolutely, I would be. Case in point, again, I keep mentioning the ficus tree that's in poor condition. Our code, we have some challenges with our code. So the fact that double mitigation would be required for this tree in poor condition is, I understand the appellant's request and urgency to plea for a reduction in that, because again, had they requested to remove that tree in poor condition at that time, it would have been no questions. We would have approved it. We're just going in accordance with the ordinance. So if there is a motion or a desire to reduce or buy alternatives for any particular of the trees, especially the one in poor condition, I'm definitely amenable to that and will support that wholeheartedly.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Rashad. So based on what we've heard, then it sounds to me like there could, depending on the feeling of the board, is I guess this could be continued to allow the applicant and Ms. Rashad, the city, to come to an agreement as to the best way to potentially proceed on this, or we could try and decide what that would be right at this time, correct? In which case
you could make a motion.
I'm not certain if that would be the best way to go or if it would be to continue. I'm sorry? My thing is frozen. Sorry. Dr. Hopper, can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you fine.
Okay. So I would either make a motion to continue this to allow the applicant and the city opportunity to work that out. Otherwise, maybe we could come to some sort of agreement now about the best way to find a solution at this time to resolve this matter. But I would need help with that from Mr. Schad based on the complexity of calculating some of the code type issues.
Right, so well, it's actually the decision of the board, however you would like to proceed. If we would like to discuss the particulars of these two trees and, you know, how we could either reduce for the two trees or the one, or if we want to have the arborist report provided to environmental resources, which is probably most ideal. I wouldn't want to render any decisions without reviewing any additional information that may be helpful to making an informed decision.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Rashad. So with that said, I'd be happy to make a motion to continue this unless if there's any other board members who would like to speak, I guess. I can't see anybody, so.
So we're going to ask the appellant if he would agree for a continuance to allow him to submit that information to Ms. Rashad.
Hi, I would love to continue. It is that we have a 12% construction loan currently on the property. And the longer it takes, more costly for us. And to be honest, we're barely breaking even now on the property because so even if we have to plant more trees at this time, we'll be happy to on the property just to complete the project.
I think you're going to have to speak closer to your microphone.
Even if we have to plant more trees, then we would have, in case we would provide additional information, I think in the end it would be more beneficial for us because we really have high interest construction from a private lender on the property.
So if I understand you would rather have a decision today than, is that correct?
Or if I may add or ask, it may be feasible for environmental resources to change our recommendation to approval, to consider approval with conditions. And the condition would be that the appellant would provide environmental resources with any updated information, and the board giving environmental resources the authority to make any adjustments that's favorable for both the city and the applicant, and then issue the permit from there without having to reschedule to another hearing.
What do you think, Mr. Colley?
I think that's genius. I think that should be the motion. What Ms. Rashad just mentioned right there. An approval. So basically, if I read that correctly, we would be approving the appeal, if this is correct, with the condition that the appellant provide environmental resources with the updated information and allow environmental resources the flexibility to determine what's best in this case for the city and for the appellate so that it does not happen. So I guess, does that sound correct, Mr. Rashad?
Yes, 100%.
So
I will second that motion.
Okay.
Good. There's a motion and a second. Any discussion on that motion?
Chair, if I may, Amber Ketterer from the City Attorney's Office. I would highly recommend to provide some, maybe some parameters to the city, because if not, the city made a decision. There was an appeal of this decision, and this board is really supposed to decide that appeal. By sending it back to the city saying, okay, we're just going to send it back to the city to decide without any parameters, then, we may just find ourselves back where the applicant's not happy and he may want to appeal again to this board, which is circular, rather than appealing this decision to the city commission, because he really doesn't know what this decision is. There's no finality to it if there's no criteria or parameters or additional guidance. Does that make sense?
Would it make sense that the parameter being the city will review the submitted materials under the lens as if he were submitting for an initial permit?
Yes, that would provide, I think, the guidance needed for a more concrete decision.
Mr. Colley, are you accepting of that?
Yes.
Okay. Is that sufficient guidance?
Mr. Chad, is that okay?
Yes, I'm sorry. For me, it is,
Okay.
yes.
Okay, good.
Is there a second?
Yes,
Is there discussion?
this is the discussion.
Okay, can I discuss?
Yes, you may.
I know the last meeting we had a similar case in Little Havana of some ficus trees that were cut down, and there was discussion and kind of understanding that the trunk is not traditional northern deciduous hardwood tree. There's a lot of air in there. There's a lot of aerial roots. So when they wrap the tape around at DBH and get 70 inches, it's not really 70 inches of like mass wood. I know it's a different type of tree, but I was wondering if that would be taken into consideration also as far as mitigation of this.
Yes, it would be, and coincidentally, it's the same arborist for this particular project that it was for that one.
Oh, really?
Yes. So it's a busy arborist.
Yeah. Doing the same
If
thing.
if he's provided information to that, that speaks to that, absolutely. We will definitely consider that as well.
Okay. Any other discussion on the motion? Okay, let's have a roll call, please.
Who was the second?
I was.
Mr. Trachtenberg.
Mr. Colley?
Yes.
Mr. Trachtenberg?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
I think we lost Mr. Campbell.
I'd be on the train.
Ms. Galvez Turros?
I think we lost her too. Oh, there she is. But she needs to turn on her mic. There you go.
Yes.
Ms. Odell?
Yes.
Mr. Prieto y Munoz?
Yes.
Mr. Ryan?
Yes.
Mr. Tragash?
Yes.
Dr. Hopper?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously, and this decision is final unless appealed to hearing boards within 15 days.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Love your background, Mr. Trachtenberg. Love it.
And also,
great evening.
Sorry, it's actually a photograph that was taken by me.
He's hanging out in Olathe State Park.
This is actually the Florida Keys. It's a mangrove island.
Nice.
Here.
Okay, now for item numbers.
Before we finished, we did receive another public comment regarding Charles Avenue. Would you like me to read it into the record?
Yes.
Okay. This was submitted by Michael March. And his comment is, I live across the street from 3603 Charles Avenue. That property is on the northwest corner of Charles Avenue and Plaza Street, whereas my property is on the southeast corner of the same intersection. 2 years ago, when 3603 Charles Avenue was designated, the owner, Cynthia Brown, was unable to be present to appeal the decision as she lives out of state. Her husband had recently passed away, apparently, and her mobility was decreased due to her advanced age. I did try and warn some other nearby neighbours who were acting as caretakers of the property to encourage the owner to appeal her designation, but I am not sure if my message was passed on to the owner, Cynthia Brown. I did not have a phone number by which to contact Cynthia Brown directly. At the time, we only had 15 days in which to appeal the historic designation, which occurred on 7/16/18. Thanks to the help of a legal team and the 13 other neighbours who were also appealing their designations done at the same time as part of the same multiple property thematic designation of wood vernacular homes, I was able to file an appeal in time. I feel that many of my neighbours who were also designated did not have a full understanding of what was going on, all that was at stake, and what opinions they had, if any. At a meeting of the HEP, Historic and Environmental Preservation Board, which ran past midnight, I appealed the historic designation of my own home, which has a folio address of 3586 Charles Avenue. My appeal was denied by the HEP, but a second appeal was later granted by the City Commission. I hope you will grant the request for repeal of my neighbour's property, as their opinion was never solicited or heard before they were designated historic without their full knowledge, understanding or approval. I hope that in the future the City of Miami will not designate any more homes historic without the knowledge and express approval of the property owners. The City of Miami should not be designating any properties historic without a response from the affected property owners. I find this practice to be very unprofessional and unfair on the part of the City of Miami. It goes on the night of our appeal before the HEP, the property at 3603 Charles Avenue received an extra few minutes of scrutiny because of the drastic alterations to the structure. A large two-storey addition was made to the original one-storey home. Had a representative from the owner's family been present, I believe that the property would have been easily removed from the historic designation list due to the alterations to the property. Many other properties were removed from the final designation list due to much lesser alterations, the difference being the removed properties had representatives from the owners who spoke up in a timely manner. The fact that no one spoke up for this property at the time meant that this property was designated when it very easily could have been exempted based on alterations. This made the designation process very arbitrary and unfair, and I hope that the request for rescission or removal of this property's designation please be granted. Thank you. So that was a comment received.
Okay, thank you. And now item number 6.
File ID 7738, 2021 Master Calendar Approval.
Who's going to lead the discussion?
One question, I believe there was a ruling that came out that there should be no board meetings designated for federal holidays. Has that been taken into account in the preparation of the calendar?
Yes.
So none of them should fall on holidays then?
Right, that's listed at the bottom. Any discussion on the meeting dates draft, or are we ready to adopt it? Is there a motion to adopt the draft of meeting dates?
I'd like to make a motion that the 2021 meeting dates be adopted.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Is that Mrs. Galvez-Torres?
Yes, sir.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? Let's have a roll call, please.
Mr. Trachtenberg,
Yes.
Ms. Galvez-Turros,
Yes.
Mr. Colley,
Yes.
Ms. Odell,
Yes.
Mr. Prieto y Munoz, COA?
I think we lost him.
Mr. Ryan?
Yes.
Mr. Tragash?
Yes.
Dr. Hopper?
Yes,
And motion passes unanimously.
thank you very much. Is there anything else to come before the board?
That's all.
No? Nothing?
Question. I have a quick question, just out of curiosity, because we're about to elect a new mayor. What's going on with the Playhouse, the Coconut Grove Playhouse?
I have not heard anything. I don't know if Amber has an update. I'm not sure. I haven't heard anything recently.
Okay.
There's Amber.
Okay, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second. Thank you. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed? Motion carries. We'll see you next month.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.